So Anthony Yarde and Joshua Buatsi are looking to finalise their fight for June. Anthony Yarde said he's wary of the unrealistic demands that some people have. He's talking about Buatsi and Ben Shalom. It looks like there could be a battle of which platform is going to get the fight. Richard Riakporhe and Chris Billion Smith are set to fight each other for Billion Smith's WBO Cruiserweight title. It says here that they are not going to do anything until the negotiation for Yarde and Buatsi is resolved. So they obviously want to put that fight either on the undercard or to co-headline. Caroline Dubois' next fight has been put on hold until the Yarde-Buatsi situation is resolved. It would be a shame if it didn't happen because they couldn't make a decision on which platform should have it. And that's where that Saudi bag comes in handy. It takes all the egos, all the A-side talk out of the negotiation, doesn't it? The Saudi bag. But Frank Warren wants his fight in the UK. Both he and Ben Shalom need to get a move on. Like, Yarde, still not a world champion yet. He's in his 30s. Buatsi hasn't had a world title fight and he's in his 30s. And they're still trying to knock out the kinks for a domestic fight, basically. It's crazy. Is it once stung, twice shy for Ben Shalom? Because back in 2022, he let Joseph Parker go over to Queensbury to fight Joyce. And Joyce cleaned him up. And Joseph was yet to have a fight on his Sky contract. They tried to rehabilitate him and build him back with the Jack Massey fight, but that was not a success. And that was his last fight on Sky. And that was his last and only fight on Boxer, if I remember correctly. The investment was sunk, gambling on the away platform. It must be approaching 3 years since Canelo lost to Dimitri Bivol. I was excited about that challenge to see if he could beat a skilled light heavy. No rehydration, no catch weight. But since then, Canelo hasn't been in a make your hair stand up on your back type of fight. Golovkin, third fight, that wasn't that type of fight for me, where I was thinking, wow, this is really huge. John Ryder, not a standout fight. Jamal Charlo, not a standout fight. And I'd actually say the same for Jaime Munguia. I don't rate David Benavidez like a lot of his cheerleaders rate him. But I do take into account, it's not just my opinion, I'm looking at the movement, the David Benavidez movement. There is a lot of people who want to see that fight at this moment right now. So when he comes out and says David Benavidez brings nothing to the table, that's not true. It's not true. When he says he wants $150 to $200 million to fight David Benavidez, I could get on my soapbox and start taking him apart for that. But that's just the ego talking, isn't it? That's just the smack talk. That's all that is. A little bit of a cheap shot to rally up his fans who want to tell the world that Benavidez shouldn't get the fight. Now, it's not a matter of who thinks he deserves the fight, because individual bias can determine how you answer that. But trying to manufacture the likes of Jamal Charlo as a credible 168-pound challenger, not a good look. Munguia is a better option than Charlo, I'll say that much. But right now, after the last month or so where they've had to restructure his deal at the PBC, issues with handing out that guarantee for the likes of Jamal Charlo and what other unsuitable opponents Canelo wanted to fight, I'm looking at the David Benavidez fight and say, well, it is a legacy fight for Canelo, whether he likes it or not, whether his fan base like it or not. It's not that much dissimilar to when Canelo was coming of age and his contingency were marching to the arena in expectancy that he was going to take Floyd's oath, and that was a big event, and this will be an equally big event. Saying that he doesn't bring nothing to the table is disingenuous. Of course, the young lion doesn't bring as much as the older lion in terms of finances to the table. But this is supposed to be an exercise to see if the older lion can keep hold of his kingdom and put the younger lion back in his place. But we're not getting that. The Canelo contingent can try and sell it to the Benavidez contingent that Munguia is a very credible fight. But most of boxing scribes, media and fans don't believe Munguia is going to win. That doesn't mean he can't win. But that's what determines what kind of buzz the fight has. Now, Cinco de Mayo an unbeaten Mexican with a crowd-pleasing style like Munguia, it will do decent numbers. It will do decent numbers. But probably not as much as a David Benavidez fight at this point right now. But there are a lot of people who are a little disillusioned with Canelo. Let's just be honest. And I believe the Dimitri Bivol loss done something to Canelo, which has resulted in a bit of a mercenary, I'm going to do whatever I can to get the most money and not take the fights that a lot of people are saying are dangerous. He said he's achieved everything. Well, no boxer, no person achieves everything, but you know, he says he's not under no pressure to take the Benavidez fight, and I'd agree with that actually. I would agree with that. Not under no pressure to take the fight. He's made millions, he's beat some very good opponents, he's become undisputed. I would agree. Because no matter what you do anyway, people are always going to question the legacy, especially in this era.
The biggest problem for Tszyu is the rehydration of Benavidez. You heard that in the comments about 25 pounds and stuff like that. Like, Benavidez will come into the ring probably not a million miles off 200 pounds. Certainly 190. So Tszyu's going to come in at 175, 180 tops. So he's going to come in nearly a stone heavier probably.
Canelo said all Benavidez brings to the table is 25 pounds extra. He is a big lad. Canelo has also outsized opponents. He looked considerably bigger than Miguel Cotto. He was definitely a lot heavier than Amir Khan. And likely, that's the biggest issue. He just doesn't like the weight that David Benavidez is going to have over him. I think that's probably the biggest issue. It's a bit of a dead subject anyway, because he can't just put it all on Canelo. David signed to fight USYK, didn't he? A light heavy. So why are they still like, oh, Canelo's ducking the fight? He might want to take the Canelo fight, but probably can't make the weight no more. And it looks like he's milking this Canelo ducking thing with his dad and Samson for all they can. So I call bullshit on both sides, Canelo and Benavidez, yeah? But because, you know, like, people like rooting for the underdog when someone like Canelo's winning too much, David is developing a fan base of this. And it's just basic clout chasing to sell his USYK fight, whoever he's going to fight next.
As you mentioned, it is what it is. There was no hesitation. It was a straight away 10-second thing. Yes, it made me pissed off, but yeah, the focus shifts and the show goes on. Simple.
And sorry, Tim, was there anyone in your camp who potentially was wary of taking such a potentially tricky opponent? I mean, he's such a too tall in some ways for the division.
It is what it is, man. You got to be able to take on all comers. He's tricky, he's tall, but whatever. I'm confident in victory by any means anyway.
It's becoming a regular thing, but we are here. I'm joined by the one and only Boxing Beats and Rhymes. Welcome. What a fantastic relationship we're forming.
Yes,
regular
indeed.
Lives.
Well, we got the pullout from Keith Thurman, Tszyu.
A better opponent with Fundora. Yeah. I think he's a better opponent, though.
He's coming off a knockout loss, though, to Brian Mendoza.
I think he might be all right, you know.
You don't think
he... do you think Keith Thurman would have been a better one?
Well, one's coming off a knockout loss. The other one hasn't been relevant at 147 for years. Coming off a knockout loss, and you're fighting for 2 titles. There's 2 titles on the line.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem right. Thurman pulled out a week and a few days before the first bell. So they got to save the show. So you can argue that Fundora is not the worst replacement at short notice. It's a fair argument. But you have to look at the whole episode. What was Keith Thurman doing on the fight poster against the WBO 154-pound champion at a catchweight limit of 155, I believe? What was all that about in the first place? I mean, you got to keep it real. This is 2024, where the likes of Tszyu, a title belt holder, fights twice a year. A Keith Thurman fight might not go down officially as a world title fight. But if one of your 2 fights as a champion is against Keith Thurman in a non-title fight, that's half your output for us to weigh up your resume for the year. And you have to ask, what promotional outlet would have a champion they're representing in a position to take that fight? And why would Tszyu and Glenn Jennings, I believe his name is, put themselves in this position? Odd. The PBC had the best fighter in the world on their books 8 or 9 months ago. And instead of them arranging a big fight with Tszyu, we wasted all this time. Well, at least people like me with any sense in their head knew it was a waste of time waiting for Errol Spence to exercise this rematch clause. Cataract surgery this year, my ass. It was all damage control for Errol Spence. Yeah, I'm going to fight Crawford. No, you're not. You're conveniently having eye surgery just as soon as the expiry date on the rematch clause is going to go out. Said he had eye problems before the Crawford fight. Well, like Crawford said, they do eye tests before fights. If you had any eye issues before you went in with Crawford, they would have picked it up. Could have made a big fight with Tszyu, unless Tszyu doesn't want the fight. Crawford's a free agent. The expiry date on the rematch clause for Spence ran out in February. Tim is fighting Keith Thurman, who's never been a robust fighter. His body breaks down, bicep injury. A former good welterweight champion who's way past his prime at 147 and totally unproven at 154. That's who he's fighting now. And now Tim is fighting somebody who was knocked out in his last fight. And what are the boxing fans holding on for? Oh, well, it's an interesting matchup. 6'6", 154 pounder who fights like a pressure fighter. How will Tim cope with the late replacement and a totally different style matchup than what Keith Thurman would provide? That's what you're left with. Terence Crawford has exercised his WBO welterweight privilege to get next at the winner of Fundora and Tszyu. But it's just leaving me scratching my head how Fundora gets a fight like that before Terence Crawford. Absolutely crazy. I mean, after Crawford beat the brakes of Spence, the media and us, boxing fans, were talking about a potential Crawford attempted to conquer a fourth weight against Tszyu, who's affiliated with the PBC. But instead, we see Keith Thurman and Fundora jump in the queue. Like I say, maybe Tszyu and his people, they don't want to fight yet. They need more confidence, more experience, although Tim is 29, not exactly a spring chicken. And what's Crawford going to do? Are you going to wait around to the end of this year, or maybe 2025, to get his crack at the winner of Fundora or Tszyu? Surely you need to fight in between. Surely. The difficulty Crawford has negotiating fights, you have to wonder if he gets another tune-up before the winner of Fundora or Tszyu, or even if he gets the winner. It's crazy. I tell you what, man, American boxing is something else these days. Just bizarre shit. All of a sudden, Chris Eubank is calling out Terence Crawford. For what? You ain't got no strap at 160, you got nothing at 160. Then Bomac waves it off. False flag. Is Keith Thurman actually injured? Are the PBC reacting to the reaction from the boxing world that Keith Thurman is taking this fight? Because a lot of people saw it like this. He's going to get ironed out. He's going to get ironed out at 154. He hasn't been relevant at 147 for years. And all of a sudden he's going to challenge the younger, bigger, stronger Australian kid who's probably in his prime now. It was a hard sell for all that money they're going to charge the American public on pay-per-view. And maybe, Keith is looking for a certain guarantee which they can pay Fundora considerably less. And considering that Amazon Prime are allegedly not giving up a budget, if that's true, this is where they're at. Fundora versus Tszyu. Because even though Fundora was knocked out against Mendoza last time out, he's a more relevant contender than Keith Thurman at 154. We saw the stoppage win against Erickson Lubin. They can advertise, the 6'5", 154 pounder. They can advertise that as a bit of a curiosity. His exciting style, etc., blah, blah. More than Keith, who, come on, man, let's keep it real. When people hear the name Keith Thurman in 2024 is fighting, they're like,
He did it against Anthony Joshua. Anthony had him hurt to the body, a perfectly good shot. He turned away. The same referee, may I add, Louis Babon, right? He turned away and the referee bought it and gave him time to recover. That was against Anthony Joshua, okay? So something is going on. They need to sort that out. The Fury that we know will play with USYK. He conned the ref.
Big up the underrated boxing trainer from Britain, Don Charles. Now, where do you want to go with the debate? Was the Joshua shot low, the right hand to the body? Was the Daniel Dubois shot low, right hand to the body? Well, I'm sure you got better things to do with your day than go back and forth with someone who's got the opposing opinion to what you have. It's not really the point, is it? The point is he making a meal of these shots, whether they landed legally or illegally? Now, Don, that video hasn't gone down very well, but Don speaks from the heart. That's the only way he knows. Don will always speak from the heart.
Letting you silly know the jig is up.
So the jig is up. All Tyson Fury has got to do is go to USYK's body, according to the experts. Don Charles says Tyson Fury will play with USYK. I've got USYK the favourite, but it's not inconceivable that Fury could perhaps do what AJ and Daniel Dubois couldn't, and impose his size, his height, his leverage and physicality on USYK. And it's also not inconceivable that the Francis Ngannou fight showed us clear deterioration, or perhaps a fighter who's been overhyped. Perhaps USYK is targeting Fury's body. Has anyone really delivered a sustained body attack on Tyson Fury? Not really USYK's fight though, is it? Just swarm his opponent with body shots and shit. He picks ones and twos, does his feinting, uses his feet to stay out of range and get in range, and he's got great upper body movement. I don't think USYK is going to try and change too much. I think he's very confident in the approach. You might think you know what I'm going to bring, but do you know how hard it is to stop me doing it? Even if you do know. Fury has already changed his style to take the unbeaten record of the WBC champion Deontay Wilder, where many said he couldn't change his style and go forward. He's already did it once. Does he have one more reinvention against USYK? And how will he approach it? Is the Fury we saw against Ngannou and Chisora enough to become undisputed? Lots of intangibles, and I don't have the answers. Just waiting for May the 20th like you.